for item 5D, right?
Mr. President, with all, if you don't mind, D and E are both kind of mine, and I'm going to take them. Actually, I'm going to put E before D and roll them all together into one presentation.
Works fine.
If that's acceptable to the board. What I'm presenting to the board is my 2018 State of Education speech, or subtitled What I've Learned Over the Past 4 Years. So I wanted to share some information, President Narducci and fellow members of the board, and I hope I can keep up with the slides. I usually find I forget to click them, but bear with me. And are we live streaming again? Is that up and working?
Superintendent Douglas, yes, we are streaming.
Sweet. That's nice. I didn't think that was going to be able to happen. Well, whoops, what did I just do wrong?
Push the button.
I touched it, I broke it, just like that commercial. That's the one. So, oh, I do it that way. Oh, rats, that's going to be dangerous. Okay. Sorry about that. I'll try to get this right. So let's go one click. Okay. It's an honor and privilege to serve as Arizona's Superintendent and Public Instruction. Because, as I've said time and time again, in my opinion, there's no greater duty that we have as a state than to educate our children. The goal is not merely to make them worker bees or college applicants. The goal is to create successful citizens who will protect and perpetuate our great republic, who will have the ability to create their own futures, fulfilling their dreams, their goals, and their ambitions with their God-given talents. And, you know, I would just add that that's not a privilege that many children around this world have. For many places, what they become is determined for them by whatever powers that be. Through the course of my tenure in office, I've always tried to be honest but supportive of our teachers and our schools by highlighting the positive. I've said that the state of education in Arizona is improving because we are seeing modest increases in test scores. The reality is that we are seeing very minor improvements in a system that's failing our children. I will keep my comments during this report primarily to academic achievement or lack thereof of our students. So where does Arizona stand? Regardless of the source of the study, Arizona unfortunately doesn't rank well, and I'll give you a moment or two to take a look at some of those different statistics that we've been able to put together. Okay? I could read through them, or want to just read them? Oh, we lost that again. Okay, so for the audience out there, 48th in pre-K-12 education, Newsweek, D+, K-12 education from EdWeek, highest number of students per teacher, number 40, I'm just pulling a few of them randomly here, 45 in number of teachers and average teacher salary, 46 in graduation rate, C- in academic achievement, and all of this will be made available afterwards. So let's take a look at the next. Whoa, I knew I was going to do that.
They are seeing it from that screen.
Oh, okay. Oh, never mind. I didn't even realize that one was turned in your direction. Sorry. So you can see that. So where do we stand on NAEP? While we've made minor progress recently, the reality is Arizona is still below the national average. And even achieving the national average should not be acceptable for our children. I want our students pulling up the national average, not bringing it down. And then if we take a look, and I'm going to try to do this to just go whoa, I just can't seem to go one slide. The achievement gap for our most vulnerable student population is and shouldn't be acceptable to any of us. And I'm sorry these aren't looking a little bit bigger, but we'll also get you a copy of this presentation. So let's take a look at how we do on state standards. So here are our AZ Merit third grade ELA. Currently, 44% of our third graders are proficient in English language and reading. Please think about that for just a moment. After 4 years of instruction, we are incapable of teaching 56% of our children to read and write and communicate in our own language. That's shameful to me, and I question whether or not that would even begin to instill a love of reading in our children, which will get them everywhere they want to go. The next one is our AZ Merit third grade math. After 4 years of instruction, 40% of our third graders are not proficient in basic arithmetic. Now, everybody says the Ames test hasn't been around quite long enough, and so it doesn't have enough track record. Let's take a look at our Ames, fourth grade Ames science. Those standards are being taught for over a decade now. It's not a new test. And our science standards, our Ames test, only 61% of our fourth graders passed. When we come to eighth grade science Ames, only 59% of our students passed eighth grade. We heard some comments here today about the lack of knowledge that our children have in history. We have a civics test that's was implemented by the governor his first bill he passed. We don't know, we don't collect data for that because that's just the school district puts an acknowledgement that the student has passed the test before graduation. But we do know that a 60% an F is deemed passing. And it does seem apparent to me that our students just don't know what they need to know about our country. I read an interesting article about our education system and the failing of it. It was actually written back in the early 90s. But one of the interesting things to me that the author said about it was, and we heard a lot today about the standards and higher level thinking, and we can't have our kids memorize fact. But to this author's point, which is very valid, you can't build a second story where there is no foundation. So let's take a look at our ELA AZ Merit proficiency, and I'm going to actually ask you to take a look, and it's going to be hard because it's going to be small, but we'll take a look at B-rated schools. Of 610 B schools, 399, or at 65% of those B-rated schools, 50% of their students did not pass the ELA test. At math, there we go. Take the same look at our B-rated schools again. Again, 610 schools. Only 213 of those schools have 50% of their students proficient or passing math. Only 35% of the B-rated schools have their students passing. Move on when reading. Well, we do often talk about the harm of the economy of un- or undereducated children. The true tragedy to me is the loss of the human potential of our children's dreams, goals, and ambitions. The quote that I picked up on the bottom there talks about it in terms of human capital, and that's a term I absolutely despise. Our children are not human capital and should not be merely cogs in a machine. They need to be, God bless you out there, who's ever sneezing. It needs to be about their goals, their ambitions, and also their duties as citizens. So let's take a look for a moment at some of the impact, this has. How can we allow our students to come out of high school with a diploma and yet they are not ready to do college level work? This is some information from Maricopa County Community College District, but from everything we've been able to ascertain, it is not unique to Arizona. It's pretty much the way college prep looks across the nation. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that every single student should go to college. But if they go unprepared, they are less likely to finish, and they are left without a degree, but with a lot of debt. But sometimes I think, hey, the schools get the dollars, so maybe that's what it's really all about. According to, let me flip, I think I have another one on the remediation, yeah, that will talk about the lower probability of students being able to actually get a degree and the impact that it has upon them. There was an Arizona Central article, and it was back from 2014, I believe it was. I don't have the exact citation here. But it said that 79% of those who had been out of high school at least 1 year need remedial classes. And I don't begrudge anybody that, because, a lot of people don't know that they're going to go to college, and maybe you've forgotten things along the way. And so that makes sense to me that there might be a need to that. But 54% of students registering after finishing high school need remediation. So what is the impact? And there's just some information up there for you about what the likelihood is. We talk all the time about students who can't read at grade level by the end of third grade, how sadly bleak their prospects can be. Don't have to be, but may be if they aren't able to read. And that's 56% of our third graders. This speaks for itself. People who can read well have every door open to them and are always capable of continuing their education with or without a school or a teacher. So the next slide, it's probably going to be really hard to read. Whoops, sorry. Just a little bit of historical information that you'll be able to see better. We'll get you the full presentation. Talks about where we were with different types of standards, schools, states that have passed legislation for school choice, some of the issues around charter schools, school finance reform, statewide assessments, how they've increased, things like that. So. Whoops. There we go. I'll finish this portion of my presentation with what for me is a very powerful quote. As a matter of fact, if you go up to the reception area of the 4th floor, when I took office, I had a picture put up there right in our reception area to remind everyone here. It's a picture of a water wheel. And I often spoke about this when I was on the Peoria School Board, that it's to be a constant reminder that as we adults continue to experiment with ed school fads and theories, or rebranded previously proven education failures like whole language or like block scheduling, our children's precious education time is lost. Like the water in this river we're reading about, we can never retouch that child's education time in the same way ever again. So Governor Ducey, he came and addressed this board in March of 2015, albeit with a very different membership of this board. I believe, Member Taylor, you were probably, I was in Washington at the time, and you were probably the only one that was on the board at that point in time. He directed this board to do a review of the standards. He mandated that the board use what was then known as the Common Core standards, which were already in place. And we included a review of pre-Common Core standards from other states. An outright replacement of Common Core with completely different standards was not an option under the procedures and protocols that had been created by the governor's staff and the then State Board of Education staff. Despite those restrictions, I believe we did some amazing work. We made significant progress. 40% of the math standards were revised, and almost 50% of the English language standards were revised, rewritten, realigned. Arizona is the first state in the nation to include foundational writing standards, i.e. cursive in their standards, math fluency for memorization of basic arithmetic facts so that 40-some% of our third graders aren't unable to do basic arithmetic. We removed embedded curriculum. I was delighted, we got rid of an appendix that included a recommendation to our schools that obscene literature be read by their students. And yet, despite these changes, I'll remind you, under our current education system, 56% of our third graders can't read or write at grade level, and 47% cannot do arithmetic at grade level. Arizona Revised Statute 15704, H 1 through 3, phonics has been the law of the land for many years. As I've seen while I've traveled around the state visiting classrooms, we seem to prefer one new fad or unproven theory after another instead of one of the numerous proven phonics and arithmetic programs. And, I often wonder if that is not perhaps because Arizona had two nationally recognized whole language gurus who headed up our colleges of education, this is my opinion, mistrained our teachers. But I believe that because I actually had teachers trained under those colleges of education who came up to me and said, we were told if we teach children to read with phonics, we are going to make them learning disabled. Not acceptable. Now, I think it's the next agenda item, or one coming up very shortly, we'll be clarifying the expectation of phonics training for our teachers. But it'll be brought forward, if I remember correctly, with a delay that will only allow for more students' water to go over the wheel, if you will. It's been 35 years since a nation at risk. We can take a look at all the education reforms that have come down the pike since then. What do all of these educational reforms have in common? They are all motivated by money and power. So publishing and textbook companies can create a demand and sell new textbooks, instructional programs, and tests, or by special interest groups that are too often driven by politics, but not the best interests of our children. I've always tried to be optimistic and highlight improvements when reporting on our current education system in Arizona wherever I possibly could. Yes, in many ways, we are making small gains, but those are very small gains in a system that has been failing our students. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That's credited to Albert Einstein. And on our new day and age of, and no disrespect to anybody, but I heard it here made in some of the public comments that our students don't really need to know any facts because they're clicking. They can click the device in their hands to learn it. Well, if you go to those devices in your hand, you'll see the same quote accredited to many, many different people. So how do we know what we're actually, that what they're clicking to learn is really the truth? So just to kind of finish up, that is why today I bring to this board an alternative. And it's what I consider to be the gold standard for K-12 academics, the Hillsdale College Barney Charter School Scope and Sequence. For those of you who are not familiar with Hillsdale College, it has been in existence since 1844. I was recently told, I learned that ever since its inception, it has admitted women and blacks, which is something many of our public colleges did not do for a very, very, very long time, and a lot of times only after a lot of battling. Hillsdale's a private college which has never taken any government funding, neither state nor federal. And to those out there who believe our children would be better served if we privatized our education system, then this is how it has to be done. It's impossible to privatize an education system as long as we continue to use public money to do so. Hillsdale programs are created solely in the best interests of the students they serve without political influences or motivated by special interest dollars. The Hillsdale scope and sequence is written in plain English, not education-ese. And I've heard it stated, and if I'm not mistaken, I've heard it stated in this very boardroom that standards should be written in, I'll call it educationese, that secret language or code that only educators are able to understand. To that, I say nonsense. These standards set clear expectations. Parents will understand exactly what to expect for their child's education or their children's education and from their children's schools, exactly as it should be, because we serve them, not ourselves. Chris Cotterman, when he was here, said, representing Arizona School Board Association, teachers know what's best for students. Teachers may know or think they know what's best for students, but parents know what is best for their children and should always be the decision maker. He's not here today, but frequently our education Lorax comes and speaks to us about creating a world-class education system for our students in Arizona. In my opinion, adoption of these standards will be a giant step forward in that direction. And for the record, Hillsdale standards include evolution and climate change standards. So with that, I thank you for your consideration. We are just, God bless. These are on your drive to be presented for your consideration and review as you take a look at the other science and social studies standards that have been presented. My recommendation is, since it's obvious so many are unhappy with the changes, even though we made significant changes to ELA and math, that they are not deemed adequate. So I recommend this board take a look at that whole program and seriously consider that is what we need to get our children where they need to be if what we say that we want for our children is truly what we want for our children. Thank you all for your service, and God bless.
Thank you.